Thank you, Rordi. Gracias. Un placer estar con ustedes. Thank you all so much for being here today. For very personal reasons, as I identify as a daughter, mother that carries with her the weight of what it feels like to be an immigrant, I am beyond thrilled and honored to have the opportunity to moonlight this evening and interview our very special esteemed guest, award winner and journalist Maria Hinojosa. Maria has helped tell the story of Americans' untold stories and brought to light unsung heroes in America and abroad for more than 25 years. Maria is the anchor and managing editor of NPR's Latino USA, president of Futuro Media Group, and did I mention 4 Emmys? And of course, the author of Once I Was You, a memoir of love and hate in a torn America, which I personally listened to in audio, and it was so incredibly touching to be able to hear Maria's voice. I have a copy of the book myself, pass it on, but I would encourage everyone to hear her tell her story in her words. I'm also happy and delighted to share with all of you today in the audience that you'll receive a free copy, courtesy of Capital One, of her book. If you have not already devoured it and read it start to finish, I encourage you to please do that. As mentioned, we aim to have a closed-door conversation. Our goal really just aims to pull back the curtain on Maria's very storied career. And the making of her memoir, which is a deep and personal story, what keeps her motivated and what she'll do next. So I think let's just dive right in because you all are here to hear from Maria. So Maria, I'd like to just start by, giving you the floor. Please, I know we've introduced you, but feel free to introduce yourself in your own words to this audience, open up the conversation, and then I have many questions for you.
Hey, everybody. How are you doing? It's great to see you. For us, it's like celebrate every day. And it's just like, this is how we do every day. I still find it fascinating, that we are kind of in a month. And of course, aprovechamos and we take these moments to, uplift. Absolutely. But the truth is, and you all know this, right, is that there's just so much data that says that who we are is basically the future. And so sometimes it feels like we're still just kind of having to say, you see this? Because that fully half of the entire population growth that occurred in the last census was Latino and Latina births. So half of the entire population growth came not from immigration and Latina immigrants, but actually from Latinos and Latinas, let's just be honest, getting it on. So we can laugh, but what it means is actually, it's actually quite hopeful in many ways. And it also means we're not going anywhere and that we are, como mis papás that bought their home at the end of the 1960s on the south side of Chicago. It's like, wow, a lot of people might have just said, I'm out, but they said, we're staying. So that's kind of what I'm feeling, is that as difficult as it may be, we are staying, and we are economic and political powerhouses. And in our own way, our voices are what keep us alive. So it's great to be with you.
Maria, let's just dive right in. Tell us a little bit about what drove you to drive such a deeply, write such a deeply personal book.
So I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, it's the only way I know how to be. So I really did not want to write a book. Writing books is quite challenging. It's really hard. And selling books is challenging. And I like to succeed. So I don't like to do something where it's not. And, writing a book is a big risk. So I wasn't really looking to write this book, but I think the experience of the last administration and kind of really coming to terms with what our country is capable of doing, specifically to Latinos and Latinas and immigrants in general. It kind of forced me to, really it was the chair of my board who said, you really need to write this book. She wanted me to write the book, Illegal is Not a Noun. There's no such thing as an illegal human being. It's something that I had a moment and I went viral from MSNBC. And yeah, I'm just here to say, after you go viral, you still just basically are the same. Nothing really happens. But I did kind of feel like, okay, I could write that book. Illegal is Not a Noun will be a short little book, the kind that we used to, when we were traveling in airports all the time, and you just kind of pick it up and read it in one plane sitting. And then, and when it turned out that I was able to kind of get my agent, mine had retired, and then write up a proposal, and there were really no publishers who were interested in that book. And they were like, we would really like you to write your memoir. And I'm just like, no. And then my editor, Michelle Herrera Mulligan, Mexican Irish from the south side, from west side of Chicago. She said to me, yeah, and you know what? It's not just going to be your memoir. It's going to be a big book. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, I want you to write a big book, a book that tiene peso. And I said to her, like, what kind of a big book? She was like, basically like Michelle Obama's O Becoming. And I was like, you are kidding me. Like, what? What kind of an expectation? What? And I was terrified. I was very scared. And I just think that for me, a guiding principle is just being very clear about the privilege that I have. Like, sure, things are rough, but I have extraordinary privilege. And therefore, this sense of responsibility that just really pushes me. And so I was like, okay, I got to write this book. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad I did, because so many people have connected with it, just in the way that you were, you just kind of like, it's so powerful. Your speakers have said that it's like, to hear it in my voice, but it's a thing because it's like a primer for all of us in this country, but specifically for Latinos and Latinas and immigrants of all backgrounds, to just be like, whoa, okay. And just kind of sit with, the weight of what our presence means. So I am so glad that my editor forced me to push through my own fear to write this big book.
No small task, and very well done. The topics you cover are deeply personal. Can you tell us a little bit about why they're relevant today and now to the Latino community today?
Well, I mean, the book kind of starts with me talking about a sense of invisibility and feeling kind of invisible from the national narrative and invisible from the mainstream media. And I'm like, well, if you ask many Latinos and Latinas today if they feel invisible from the national narrative and invisible from mainstream media, they would say, yeah, still, even though our population, is what, 62 million. I remember when Latino USA started, we were at 33 million. 32, 33, 34 million. So the numbers have grown substantially, but the sentiment of basically not being seen, having a narrative being told around about us that is not necessarily really encompassing who we are. And so that's weird, isn't it? That we would be that this many years into my career, being the first Latina in all of the newsrooms where I worked, and that you have this progress. Like, yes, I mean, look at all of you. Look at Hispanic Executive magazine. So we have this progress, and yet we're still kind of battling some of the same issues. Some themes that came up in the book that, really have resonated with people. I mean, I was experiencing tremendous imposter syndrome as a new budding journalist, not having anyone around me to see. And so a lot of people have talked about that, and people are still feeling imposter syndrome. And there's a big feminist theme that happens, me as a woman, as a survivor. So there were these themes that came through that are just like, wow, they're really present today. So that's good in terms of being a writer, but it's not so good in the sense of our society not making as big as strides as I really would have hoped for.
It's humbling to my ears to hear that someone like you could struggle with imposter syndrome. And I'll share that I was once told that the imposter never thinks that they have imposter syndrome. So that's a good sign to know that you're not an imposter. Page, and for all of you, please mark this page 234, so relevant to professionals. You talk about, that your idea for Futuro Media Group really came where you were in a professional low. And I found that so impactful and powerful because we are consistently told that our best ideas and success happens when you're experiencing success. So I'd love you to talk a bit about that. And of course, share and tell us about your organization and the gaps that you find that it fills in the current landscape.
So that some of us who are not born in this country, where we have this very immigrant-y thing. And even if you have immigrant parents, you also have this thing. So it was 2010, and basically I was the jobs that I had been promised, the job that I did have, all of those productions were shutting down. Remember, it was the Depression. And so I went to 60 Minutes. I was able to get an interview with 60 Minutes. I should have, taken the hint when they said, we'll see you at the Starbucks, that they weren't really serious. I was very hopeful, and they basically said, hey, can you just wait until one of these old white men gets sick or dies? And I didn't know to laugh. What? And so I got on the subway at 59th Street up to Harlem 125th, and I cried the whole time. And I was like, I really should go. How are we going to pay the rent? I should go on unemployment. No, I would never go on unemployment. I could never tell my father, who by then was already battling Alzheimer's, but still, so he might have registered or not, he would have forgotten. But I was like, I cannot tell my father that at this point in my life, I'm going on unemployment. I should have, because I had been paying into unemployment my whole life. But so I was like, no. And so that is a pretty low. I was crying with my sister, just like, I can't do this. And then okay, well, I'm just going to jump off this deep end. I have this idea, somebody who wants to work with me to help create my own company. I don't have any money. How am I going to, and then, just the deep end of okay, well, we're going to try, and I'm going to ask for this money. As a journalist, you don't really asking for money because it was a nonprofit. I wasn't looking for investors because I wanted to do it as a nonprofit because the money was not about me. It was about the work. And it was pretty difficult. I guess considering, it was somewhat easy because people knew me, but considering when you compare it to other media companies started by men, mostly white men that were independent, who were getting millions, it was a struggle for sure. And people were like, you're going to do audio, radio, podcasts? That's who's doing that? And you want to talk about diversity? Come on, really, who cares? Well, Futuro Media is doing great. We are having 2021 has been our banner year. We launched Futuro Studios, that dropped, Suave, critically acclaimed podcast about my relationship with a man who's been in prison for 31 years. We dropped the Selena, Anything for Selena podcast. We dropped La Brega. We dropped right now, we have dropped on Spotify, Loud, the history of reggaeton with Ivy Queen. It's on the top 5 music podcasts in the world. And we're a little tiny company, nonprofit. And it was very hard. It was very hard. We did it, but it was really hard. Scary when you're looking at how are you going to make payroll. Humbling. And I'm so glad I never gave up. And I feel a tremendous sense of privilege and therefore responsibility. And I think that's the thing that always kept me going. Just until your last breath, you're going to give it everything to keep this alive. And then if you can't, okay. And so we did, and we're here and we're thriving. We are we're thriving. And now another dream of mine has come true. So not only to create Futuro, I'm no longer the CEO because I want to do journalism. So I have created my own investigative unit. And so now I'm fundraising actively to complete so I can have 5 years of deep investigative work. And as I say to my staff, I'm 60 Minutes now. Like I'm the captain now. I am the captain now. I am 60 Minutes now. And I'm the only Latina that I know of that is running an English language national investigative unit dedicated to Latinos and Latinas. So that's coming up, and I'm doing, we're launching in 2 weeks my first ever fiction podcast, a dramatic podcast starring Karuchi Tran. So our company is just like doing really interesting creative stuff because we're humble, and honestly, I know that y'all are about making money, but that's not what motivates us.
Let's talk about money for a second. In your book,
I made that assumption. I'm like, you all want to make money. It's like, I don't want. We all want to make money. It's just that money has never been. I mean, I could always have used more. Thank God now, the kids are out of college, and so we are out of debt, and it's just like, oh my God, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Oh my God, but it was never about me getting paid the big and me making the big, and it has never. Or even using our material to make big bucks. It's happening in one way or another, slowly but surely, but that was never the motivation. And still, our team just kind of shies away from that because that's what makes us special, is this authenticity, right?
I love that. And without knowing everyone in the audience, I know that we are all about surpassing our parents' expectations for ourselves. But I do want to talk about salary. I have a question. In your book, you write about, coming to the end of your college career, Bernard College, and not having done a single internship. And they're so hard to come by because you had to wait tables to make a living, to pay for your expenses. And like so many students, you simply just couldn't afford to take an unpaid internship. There is still a debate versus paid versus unpaid internships, and it's still a hot topic. I'd love you to share your thoughts on paid versus unpaid. And you're speaking to a lot of hiring managers, so I think it's really relevant right now to hear your thoughts with this group.
Yeah, so within our company, to be honest with you, when we were really scrappy, it was hard for us to scrape together to pay an internship. And what we did do was we were like actively looking for partnerships for internships where at least they could pay, like CUNY Graduate School, for example, or Columbia J School or Northwestern. So that was one of the first things that we were able to do. And now we are kind of solidly in our interns must be paid. They must be paid. Like we have to, and also I think for us, there's another active level of conversation, which is, are they interns or fellows? Because we feel sometimes that the interns are, it's in a way a good entry point, and by the way, we end up hiring a lot. Like obviously it's a matter of timing, how that goes, but we do end up hiring a lot of young people who come with us and start either as interns and fellows. But there's a question about fellows actually being able to have a broader experience, actually getting more of a stipend, working on a long-term project, able to then deliver something that they can say, well, I did a fellowship at Latino USA or at Futuro, and I was able to do this documentary and actually produce it because I was there for a year or 9 months. But at the same time, I do feel strongly that we should keep the internship portal alive because it is a way for many students to get in the door. If they cannot do fellowships that require more, I started as an intern, so I feel strongly about trying to keep that door open. So, I have to tell you, internships during a pandemic is like, because a lot of this is the relationships that you're able to build when you're meeting people in the office. That's what, so it's so hard right now. But I would, in terms of your company, oh, absolutely. You should. I mean, absolutely. I mean, we know about what Latina consumers represent to a place like Capital One or to Hispanic Executive. You know, we are the kind of essential part of the economics of the United States. So I would be making sure that they're my interns for sure. But they should be paid. Yeah, they should be.
Capital One agrees with you. I want to talk about something else that you actually mentioned in your book, which has been a conversation over the past 18 months, but one that in general, the United States or companies didn't discuss. You write a lot about, have you struggled with mental and emotionally as a result of things you've experienced and seen in your line of work. On page 226, you actually write, Coño, what else in life? What else is life for if you can't party and dance? And how do you stay positive? Like, how do you do it day in and day out in your life? And how do you manage to cope and even remain optimistic through everything you've experienced?
Well, because I think I've been close to death. And so that's why, and not me personally, thank God, in the sense that my own life, but rather, it was this week in 2015 that I lost my best friend of 36 years, Cecilia Weissman, may she rest in peace. And I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. So I was able to, she gave me the gift of not being afraid of literally seeing death. And I'm a survivor of COVID. I have to say, I was a little reckless. I was those people who was like, COVID's not going to touch me. Come on. I travel around the country all the time. I haven't had a flu for 20 years. I'm good. And so in March of 2020, I had COVID and, it was very early. I didn't have all the symptoms typically. And, while the kids who had come back from college were basically staying out, my husband was here and, we put a pillow between us on our bed. That didn't really help much. So I gave him COVID, and we survived and we lost a lot of friends. He's lost 3 or 4 very close friends in the Dominican Republic. I've lost 2 cousins in Mexico and people who I've known, like a lot of people. So so that, like, seriously, like, that's like, that does change things. Like there is another level of like, Mo, when I'm like grateful to be alive. No, I'm like, seriously. Yeah. So that, that means something. I work really hard at trying to find that because I did, again, if you read Once I Was You, you're right. I did go pretty intimate, and I'm just like, there came a point where, after losing my dad, my cousin, my best friend, then I was almost losing my family. I was almost losing my marriage. And so I had to do a lot of deep therapy, which means you have to do a lot of work on yourself to just like, because, you can't really, your ego really doesn't fit in your moments with your therapist, not if you have a good therapist. So there was a lot of realignment that happened in my life. And I work really hard at making sure I'm finding some balance. Also, I let the emotions, I cry if I have to. This week I've cried a bit because it's the week that I lost Cecilia. And I'm not afraid to cry. I'm very disciplined too. In that year of 2015, it was a very, and I've always worked out, but that was the year when everything shifted. And I was like, no, this has to become infallible in my life. And so if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I work out every day that I can. I'm boxing, I'm doing something, I'm weightlifting, I'm training because it helps me to feel strong. And I think about Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells, you know, they didn't have the luxuries that I have and they never stopped. So like I said, I could, if I started telling you the things that, you know, the people who I've interviewed, the stories they've told, the fact that I can't find some of them, they are refugees, they're in dire, I mean, you know, you'd be crying. And I could start that in a second, start telling you, oh, well, let me tell you about, you know, the last conversation I had with Estrella, who's undocumented Mexican trans and serving an 8-year sentence for the nonviolent crime of fraud in a maximum security men's prison in the north of Texas on the border with Oklahoma. And she told me about how somebody was assaulting the only other trans woman in the prison. So I'm telling you, like, I can go down there and you will be horrified over the things that I may experience in just 1 week. So I have to be like, okay, stay calm. And also I forgot to say, I meditate every day. Also, if you follow me, I meditate every day. And I'm not that person who's like, oh my God, no. You know, sometimes I'll just lay in bed and just, you know, do, but most of the time I'm up and I'm doing mantras or some kind of sound meditation. And I can do it while I'm making my coffee, while I'm sitting there thinking, while I'm looking at my altar. So, you know, there's walking meditation. So those are the things. And in terms of not giving up, it's like, look, I have to realize like, this is the long haul. I no longer have the expectation of like, oh my God, things are going to get like imminently better because of this one thing. I think, you know, we went through that with Barack Obama, sadly. It's like, oh my God, everything is going to be, and it's just like, nope. So it's like every day chipping away at making a better society. And for me personally, making this country live up to the advertisement of this country, because I raised my right hand and I became a citizen, and I will not allow for false advertising. So that's my job. You say you're the world's greatest democracy, I'm going to make sure you are. You say you're a nation of immigrants, I'm going to make sure you are. You say you're a nation that loves Latinos, I'm going to make sure you do. You say you're a nation that believes in the free press, I'm going to make sure. You say you're a nation that says we believe in the First Amendment, I'm going to push it. That's how I live.
Thank you, Maria. You said two things that are so powerful. You talk about allowing yourself to cry, but also exercising to feel strong. And then there's such a balance in just those statements that you said. I could spend the next couple of hours talking to you about your book, but that would not do all this audience fair, because I know that they are dying to ask you questions directly from them. So I want to take this opportunity to open it up to, you know, the many like incredibly accomplished group of Latino leaders gathered here today. Know that for the question portion of this session, we will not be recording.